Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give it another minute to see who else we comes in. While you're waiting, if you have any kind of questions that have sort of jumped into your mind, there's a questions function on the right-hand side. We'll show it on a slide in a minute, but just for now, if there's anything you wanted to raise with us, and we'll pick it up at the end, then perhaps use this time to do that. Okay, right, let's get started. And I think a few more people will drop in once they've got their tea, etc. So welcome everyone, thanks for joining. We're running a session today alongside Workspace, looking at activating sustainability or beginning sustainability, that journey for your organization. So just a quick introduction to what we're going to be looking at. We've got an introduction to the speakers. So we've got speakers from Anthesis and from Workspace. And then we'll briefly talk about sustainability strategies and the different approaches that you can take to activating or starting on this journey. Then we'll look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as one methodology for doing that. And then we will move on to BCorp, which I know has become a topic of interest and discussion for some of you guys as Workspace customers and others. So we'll have a quick look at what that looks like and what's involved in going down that route. Okay, so first off, you're all muted just for practical reasons, but there is a questions function on the right hand side. So on this slide you can see where that is. Please feel free just to drop in any questions that you have. We'll either pick them up as we go, depending on how things are running or if it's appropriate, or we'll pick it up at the end when there's some time set aside for questions. So please do use that function. Okay, so introductions then. You have speaking today, you've got Andy Marsh, who is a principal consultant in our London office. Andy specialises in sustainability strategy, health, safety, environmental management systems, and he's also responsible for our internal CSR and staff wellbeing programs. So Andy's going to talk to us a bit about Anthesis' approach to using the Sustainable Development Goals and BCorp. You then have, I'll introduce myself as well. So my name's Chris Shaw, and I'm also a specialist in sustainability strategy, usually for financial services sector clients, and often working on mergers and acquisitions and setting up companies with their new strategies. Andy and I both have experience of working with companies of almost every sector and almost every size. So we're kind of talking today just around universally applicable approaches to sustainability. So I will just hand over briefly to Karen, who will introduce herself and her colleague from Workspace.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Karen Jamison, Head of Sustainability at Workspace. For anyone who isn't familiar with Workspace, so we own and manage flexible office and studio space in 60 locations across London. We have over 3,000 customers ranging from startups to established brands, one of them being Anthesis, who are based at the leather market. And I'm here with Stacey-Ann from my team as well.
Good morning.
Great, thank you guys. So really briefly, just a quick word on Anthesis. So Anthesis is a relatively new player in the market, founded less than 10 years ago, and now the largest collection of pure sustainability specialists globally, working with something like 800 clients annually. So our clients range from SMEs all the way up to kind of global brands, with some examples including Lego, Tesco, RB, that kind of thing, but also right down to much smaller companies as well. We're currently seeing a real surge in interest in sustainability strategy, whether that's from investors or from customers or from employees. And actually, it's a very busy time, which is great. But I think it goes to show just sort of where things are heading. So hence the timing of this webinar. As Karen said, we are also a leather market workspace customer, so hence we were kindly invited to do a talk on this topic today. So getting into it then, just briefly, activating sustainability really is about approaching a sustainable way of doing business, I guess, ultimately, but really it's also about beginning to think about sustainability and how it can be part of your day-to-day business. So there are loads of different methodologies for doing that. There's always an element of what we call materiality assessment, which is really looking at what are the most important interactions you have with sustainability, be they positive or negative. So depending on what you do as a business, you're having both, more than likely you're having both a positive and a negative impact. And in so doing that, you're also looking at what your risks and opportunities are when it comes to sustainability. So that, that could be across the range of environmental topics, from energy, waste, water, biodiversity impact, through social, in terms of kind of, modern day slavery concerns, or 0 hours contracts, or, employee welfare. It's a hugely broad topic area, and hence the Sustainable Development Goals, which we'll talk about in a minute, cover all of those things. And in terms of what that looks like, I guess, that kind of initial activation or that initial understanding of sustainability for your business is often, it can just be a simple workshop with your employees. It can be, all the way up to a C-suite type board meeting, or ideally both. It can also involve external stakeholders, in terms of your customers, your clients, your landlord. All those things are all relevant to your sustainability journey, so to speak. But at the end of it, really, you're going to end up with a purpose or a set of values as a business which are tied to what you do, and what's driving you to be thinking about sustainability. So just for the purposes of this webinar, we've decided to frame it around the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals were launched in 2015. They follow on from the Millennium Development Goals, which ran before them, I think, through to 2012. There are 17 of them on the screen, and they tackle all sorts of topics across sustainability, from intergovernmental issues such as climate change, environmental impacts, poverty, hunger, social well-being, etc. And there are also within each goal, there are a set of targets which sit at a government level, and more recently down to a sector level, so that all of that information is accessible, and there's a slide at the end of this presentation that has links to those. Really, we decided to frame this webinar around the Sustainable Development Goals because they are universally applicable, because it's a really nice, easily kind of digestible way of looking at sustainability, and it really is irrelevant what size business you are. There will be Sustainable Development Goals that are applicable to you. So moving on then, we just wanted to flag a tool, which again, there's a link for this at the end of this presentation. And this slide, it comes from something called the SDG Compass, which we often use with clients. And it's a really nice way of beginning the process, where you effectively map out your value chain from, okay, it may not be raw materials, it may be your customer inquiry, it depends if you're providing a service or a product, but you will have a value chain, obviously, and looking at your suppliers, your operations, your use of your product, and the end life of your product, or whether it's advice you're giving, it's the impact that advice would be having. And the SDG Compass really helps you to map out where you are interacting with the Sustainable Development Goal. So we would recommend that that's used. It's a free tool, it's online, and we use it regularly with clients, so it's something to look at as a starting point. Okay, good. So we thought we would actually frame the rest of this now around some case studies. The first of which being, we picked just because I think relatively interesting to show you that a company in almost any sector can go through this process. So this example on the screen is a North Sea shipping firm. They're providing fueling, bunkering, and emergency response facilities for the oil and gas sector up in the North Sea. They took a really simple approach. They ran through meeting with their staff and an engagement process, and they came up with these 5 SDGs that they felt were most appropriate to their business, and they then identified things they could do against each of those, or things they were already doing, which is the nice part of this process. So it's a nice example. There's some really tangible outputs or outcomes from this, and it either helps to frame things you are already doing or provide a framework for identifying new things that you can do. So there's a link to that at the end as well. And our next example is actually our own experience of going through this process. So at this point, I will hand over to my colleague Andy, who ran the process for Anthesis.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. So yeah, before I get into the actual process of what we did at Anthesis and how we used SDGs, I wanted to first say that I totally understand that it can be extremely overwhelming as a business or individuals when you see all of these 17 SDGs covering everything from peace, justice, life below water, inequality, and you need to try and work out where to start and what to do. So what I'll do now is share our experiences of how we use the SDGs at Anthesis, and hopefully it will help you in defining your approach and how you can do things in your organization. So before we get into the hows, I wanted to look at the whys. So why did Anthesis use SDGs? So it's basically similar to many organizations. Our clients want to see what we are doing in the environmental and social areas. Our staff want to work for a company that is doing the right thing, and we need to practice what we preach. So we're telling our clients to do these sorts of things, so we need to do them as well. And we chose SDGs as they are a really good way of showing that you are addressing all things sustainable and helping to address a lot of the global challenges at the moment we're facing. So onto the how. So how have we used the SDGs at Anthesis? So first up, we did a review of our sustainability impacts and opportunities as an organisation, and we do that on a regular basis, minimum annually. Part of that review looks at all the SDGs and which ones are applicable to our operations and our work. There are some really useful tools that we've used. So the one that Chris mentioned just earlier on, the SDG Compass, but also there's another tool, the United Nations Global Compact, the UNGC SDG Action Manager tool, which I'll talk about a bit later on. And they were key tools in terms of helping us, like I say, identify those key SDGs, and then following that review process, we developed a list of the SDGs, developed a sustainability policy, and then objectives and targets as well. And then we put out those SDGs, policy, objectives and targets to our colleagues, senior leadership at Anthesis, sustainability champions, suppliers and clients, and asked for their feedback on those. And that was the idea of that, was to help us prioritize where we should focus our time and efforts. And then we ended up with a structure shown in the table on the slide there. And yeah, in summary, it's broken up, as you see, into 3 sort of key areas: society, colleagues, and environment. Under society, we're tackling the headings there of human rights, anti-corruption, supply chain, and community, and then we've linked those up with those 5 SDGs. And then under the colleague section, we've got health, safety and well-being, connectivity, diversity, inclusion, pay and reward, training and development. And then again, we've linked those up with the 4 SDGs shown in the slide. And then the final section there, environment, we're dealing with those categories of energy and carbon, waste, travel, plastics and supply chain, and then link those up with those 5 SDGs. So as you can see, we haven't, we're not tackling all 17 SDGs. Through our review process, we determined that these were the SDGs that were applicable to our organization. That's not to say further on down the line, certain SDGs we'll start tackling those as well. And then I was also just going to mention that Anthesis, we're a signatory of the United Nations Global Compact. The SDGs are obviously a key part of the requirements of the UNGC. And as a signatory, you need to report annually on your sustainability progress, and particularly against all the SDGs. And that was one of the key drives, I guess, that helped us to use SDGs to drive change in the organisation. And then I was also just going to mention, we also have an EMS and QMS internally, so an environmental and quality management system. Sorry, there's lots of acronyms here, but hopefully I'm giving you the details what they actually are. And again, it's something that our clients often request of us, the EMS and QMS. And we had to link up the EMS and QMS with certain SDGs as well as part of the process. So we did this by developing the EMS and QMS objectives and targets, and then matching them up with the associated SDGs. For example, gender and equality SDG, we linked up with the QMS procedures associated with our recruitment and diversity inclusivity actions, and then an EMS target around the environmental side of things. The SDG around consumption and production, responsible consumption and production SDG, we linked up with what we're doing in sort of waste and procurement areas of the business. So who was involved at Anthesis? So we tried to spread the SDG love, if you like, across the business to help deliver the SDGs. For example, we involved the HR team in terms of the gender equality SDG. And one of the key outcomes of that was we've developed a gender pay gap review. We've involved the health and safety team. So that's connected with the good health and well-being SDG. And off the back of that, we've targeted a number of well-being campaigns, one recently on working from home, which obviously a lot of us are doing at the moment. Procurement, we've involved people that are buying stuff in the business. And that's obviously associated with the responsible consumption and production SDG. And then what we're doing there is doing some training on responsible procurement for those individuals. And then we've got office managers that life on land, climate action SDG linked with what they do in terms of energy, waste and water from our offices. And then suppliers, obviously a key one as well. So we sent to our key suppliers our sustainability policy objectives and targets and the SDGs, and asked them how they can assist us in meeting these. And so we've been working with our suppliers to help achieve this. So in terms of, I mean, I think it's really important to share that SDG love across the business, so that employees, so that everyone understands about SDGs and what you're trying to achieve, and it's not left up to one or two individuals to try and deliver against all of them. So another thing we did was to focus on just one SDG. So as mentioned previously, there's 17 SDGs, and it's hard to apply energy and resources to all of them. So what we did, we put out a vote to our staff. We gave them 6 SDGs to vote on, and the majority of staff voted on the Zero Hunger SDG. So now for the last 2 years, we've focused our energy on Zero Hunger. We've left it up to the regions and offices to come up with their own ideas. So we have staff, for example, that have done volunteering and working with local food banks, for example, homeless charities, raising money for charities through coffee mornings or sponsored cycle rides, that sort of thing. And we're monitoring the progress against this. For example, the number of staff hours volunteered, quantities of food collected, so that we can report quantitative success in this area. So hopefully this has sort of shown that even if you are a smaller organization, or you may struggle with applying time and resources to these things, these SDGs, it doesn't mean that you don't that you can't do some of the above things, you know, some of the things I've just mentioned. So next slide, please, Chris. So the next few minutes, just wanted to give you a quick overview of BCorp and how BCorp links with SDGs. Go to the next slide, please, Chris. The reason for this, Chris mentioned earlier on that a few organisations are now sort of looking at the BCorp process, and just want to find out a bit more about it. Obviously, BCorp, it's a way of implementing and monitoring positive environmental and social changes. That's sort of the key function of it. It's a new kid on the block, if you like. even though it's been around, I think since about 2006, 2007, you've got about 2,500 companies that have gone through the BCorp process already in about 50 countries. The majority of those actual businesses are SMEs as well, and they vary from, you know, small breweries, yogurt makers, clothing manufacturers, and then you've got your well-known bigger brands as well, such as Patagonia, Jamie Oliver, he's just recently gone for the BCorp process, and Ben and Jerry's, a few sort of the bigger organisations that have gone through it. So BCorp was set up to help guide businesses to not just make profit, but add value to society and improve environmental protection. It was also to form a collective voice of businesses they've got similar goals and interests, and to act as a force for good. So now, sort of, how does the BCorp process work? So in a nutshell, the first thing you need to complete is the online B Impact assessment. So that assessment is that they actually adapt that to your business, so it depends on your size and structure of the business, but it's basically broken up into 5 key sections. The first one is governance, and that includes policies and practices and your mission. The second section is on workers. That's around questions around how you contribute to your employees' financial, physical, professional and social well-being. And then you've got third section is community, so how you support the economic and social well-being of communities. Fourth, you've got an environment section, how you support environmental stewardship. And then 5, customers, so how you add value to your customers and consumers. So there's 200 questions. Each question is weighted, giving you a total score. The threshold for a pass rate for BCorp is 80 points. 200 questions is a lot, obviously. It does take time, but it is thorough, and it does make for a robust assessment. Should mention as well, actually, it's free to complete the assessment, so anyone can go on there and set up yourself on their system as a business, and then start completing the assessment, and there's no charge for that. So you can use that tool, if you like, as some sort of self-assessment to see how your business performs, and then you can use that to sort of pinpoint where you may need to improve in certain areas. Then the next stage from the assessment is verification and audit process. So this is when B-Lab staff review your assessment and make sure you've met that 80-point threshold. And if successful, you'll get the BCorp certification. And then you need to go through the verification process every 3 years. So in terms of cost, to give you an idea of that, they're based on annual sales of a business. So to give you a rough idea, an organisation with sales figures up to £150,000, you're talking about £500 to sign up to BCorp and go through the process. Business with annual sales of 150,000 to 2 million is going to cost about £1,000. And they also cater for startup businesses as well. So they've created this pending B certification level, which helps new businesses along the path to full BCorp certification. And there's information on the BCorp website. You can find out more about that. So how is BCorp linked with the SDGs? So B-Lab have been working with the UNGC, and they've developed the free online tool called the SDG Action Manager, which I mentioned earlier. It's a great tool, helps you work out which SDGs matter to your business, gives you a good understanding of your operations, your supply chains, and where your risks are, and how these link with the SDGs and the BCorp assessment. And you can use the tool to track your performance as well. What else am I going to say in this area? It works by, again, similar to the BCorp assessment. There's a load of associated questions under each SDG that you go through and you just select the right answer. So it's not too painful process. And I'd say that this is one, this is a key tool you need to sort of kick your SDG journey off, to help improve your journey in this area, and again use that along with the SDG Compass tool that Chris mentioned earlier on. So so next, Anthesis is in the process of going through the BCorp at the moment, and we are also tenants at Workspace's Leather Market site in London that Chris mentioned. So in order to deliver against a number of the SDGs and achieve BCorp, we've been working with Workspace. For example, the SDGs, life on land, good health and well-being, affordable and clean energy, all of them are connected with our office and how the landlords manage the building, or how Workspace manage the building. So in order to help this along, Anthesis, we've been working with Workspace at the Leather Market over the last few years to set up a Leather Market environment group. Now, this group is made up of tenants from around the Leather Market, and the main function of that group is to improve environmental and social benefits and impacts at the Leather Market site. And what we do is we feed back our ideas and suggestions to Workspace, and we also run we've run a number of educational campaigns and activities just to raise awareness amongst other businesses. And at this point, I will big up Workspace to say that they've made our achievements against the SDGs a lot easier, as their current operations and practices are already aligned with the SDGs, and they're delivering and developing environmental and social initiatives all the time that makes things a lot easier for us. And on that note, I will hand over to Karen and Stacey-Ann at Workspace.
Hi, good morning. Next slide, please. Hi, good morning. So one of the ways that we've been engaging with Anthesis has been the environment groups. And I think 2 years ago, we set up the first environment group, which was at Leather Market. And it really was a way for us to engage with our customers and really bring everyone together on commonalities around environment, social and governance initiatives. And so far, we've received some really positive feedback, as you can see from the slide, and it's been well received at the Leather Market. And we're now looking to see if we can introduce that at our Park Hall and Record Hall environment groups. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in the environment groups or would like one set up at one of their properties, please do get in contact with the sustainability team. Next slide, please. Yep. And then next slide, please. Great. So what do we cover in the environment group? So we cover energy performance, so electricity and gas, specifically for the properties and where you operate. So it really gives you a 360 view of how we're managing the properties. We go through the recycling statistics, and we also go through environment and sustainability events. So how we can promote, how we can introduce new events that are happening on the different sites as well. So next slide. And we've also been working on mapping our SDGs, completing a materiality assessment. So our SDG journey so far has really been looking at all 17 goals to really understand how they align to our doing the right thing sustainability strategy. So we've gone through all of the 17 goals. We've used the SDG Compass that was mentioned earlier, and we were able to drill down into 4 of the 17 goals. So affordable energy, climate action, sustainable cities, and responsible consumption and production. And one of the reasons we decided to really hone in on the 4 goals is, one, we're still in the early stages of mapping, and we really wanted to make sure that we had a robust approach going forward. So next slide. So what we're actually doing is mapping our doing the right thing sustainability strategy to the SDGs and seeing how they align and interact together. So one more click, please. So affordable and clean energy, we're looking at on-site solar generation. We're looking at how we're mapping our net zero carbon pathway, setting up a science-based target. So we're really looking at the specifics behind our objectives and targets and aligning them to the individual goals that we've got going forward. And then we've also got the responsible consumption and production. So this is really engaging with companies such as Anthesis and our suppliers, as well as our customers, and employees, and looking at energy efficiency initiatives going forward. So we're still in the very early stages. We want to make it as robust as possible, and we really want to use this as an opportunity to share our journey so far. So I'll hand over to Karen.
Good morning. Yeah, so in addition to the SDGs, we've also been using the BCorp framework that Andy mentioned earlier as well, to help us improve our environmental but also our social aspects of our own business as well as our supply chain. We've found the framework really useful and really user-friendly actually. So there's a lot of questions, but the portal does make it a lot easier, and you can flag things and save comments and everything. So it's definitely yeah, really high tech and the best portal I've used so far. And it's helped us look at, or it's helped us with our doing the right thing sustainability strategy in setting our objectives and targets across the business. Particularly on the social elements such as employee wellbeing and improving our recruitment practices. So some of our customers are BCorp certified or are going through the certification process. I believe some of them are on the call today. And they've come to us as a landlord to help them answer some of the building specific questions within the environmental section of the assessment. So for example, whether the building they occupy has a green building certification, whether the energy they use is on a green tariff, or if any of the if there's any on-site renewable energy generation, or also, you know, if they're able to monitor their energy, water and waste consumption, and whether we as a landlord have implemented any energy or water efficiency measures at their centre over the last year. So if you are filling out the BCorp assessment, do just get in touch and we'll try and help you with those sorts of questions as much as we can. And then, yeah, just before we go on to the Q&A session, I'd just like to thank Anthesis for hosting this really informative webinar, including Elle as well, who popped up randomly during Andy's section. Who is behind the scenes as well, and another Stacey from Workspace has also been working on this webinar too.
Great, thanks Karen, thanks Stacey-Ann, and thanks Andy. So that's it really from us talking at you, and we just wanted to open it up to some questions before ending with some links. So we had a few questions in on the chat, but please would now be a good time to drop any more that you have in. But I will just read out the ones we've had, and hopefully they're relevant to others too, and I'll throw these at perhaps Andy, Stacey-Ann or Karen, whoever they're most appropriate to. The first question is, do these schemes look at board and staff members and how they meet these needs at home, e.g. switching to renewables or home energy efficiency measures? Andy or Karen, I think that's probably relevant too.
No, this is, so yeah, obviously a lot of us, sorry Karen, I just jumped in there, but but yeah, obviously a lot of us are working from home at the moment, and a lot of our clients have actually asked us this sort of similar question about you know, how do you actually monitor your impacts when all your staff are working from home. It's still a bit of a grey area at the moment in terms of calculating this, you know, calculating carbon footprints of people working from home. The likes of Carbon Trust are sort of looking into this, but yeah, as I say, it's still a bit of a grey area. You know, I think there are some sort of figures, some research that has been done, you know, a few years back that sort of tried to measure the impact of people working from home. But I think there was some bit of research from BT, for example, that monitored, I think it's about 20 of their staff and what the carbon footprint of that was. So it's quite a, you know, it wasn't an in-depth study at all, but it gave a few figures anyway. But there's so many variables in there. That's the problem. You know, you've got people that may be, you know, how do you find out whether your staff have got renewable energy at home? What sort of what sort of energy efficiency, other energy efficiency measures have they got at home, and that sort of thing. There's obviously a big saving through commuting. People aren't commuting now, so that's a massive carbon footprint saving if you are measuring that sort of element in your carbon footprint, and that scope 3 element. But yeah, unfortunately, it's still a bit of a grey area, but organisations are looking into it at the moment.
And just to chip in, I'm pretty sure when I was going through the BCorp assessment tool that they did have some questions that could be relevant to people working from home. So for example, on the well-being side of things, you know, have your employees been kitted out with the right equipment to ensure that, you know, they've got a chair that's correcting their posture and that sort of thing. So there are some, but yeah, I guess there are some questions on the BCorp that are more relevant than others for different businesses. So it's quite adaptable.
That's true. Yeah. And yeah, for example, yeah, what you're saying about commuting, you know, that there's questions in the BCorp assessment regarding commuting as well, and how people travel. So yeah, they would be applicable as well, I guess.
Okay, good. Thank you both. Another question, this one's for Karen. As a new workspace tenant, please could you give me some examples of what you've implemented as a result of running through the BCorp assessment? So I guess some practical kind of outputs from that process.
Okay, so, well, I mean, we've only just started, we started looking at BCorp certification or the assessment tool just back in January. And then, so since then, we have introduced social and environmental KPIs, so personal KPIs for all of our employees across the whole business. So that was one thing that we've already done. And then also, we're currently looking to reach out to all of our existing suppliers and new suppliers to check that they share similar environmental and social values as us. So a little bit like what Andy mentioned earlier, that, you know, some of Anthesis's clients are asking, you know, whether they've got an environmental management system, for example, and that is something that we're asking our suppliers and contractors that we're working with. And also, we just asked more about their sustainability strategy. Have they set environmental and social targets themselves? Just check that we're all aligned and can give, and just know that, you know, throughout our supply chain, we're influencing them as well. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just to add to that, Chris, sorry,
Andy,
yeah, I mean, we're currently being audited at the moment by B Lab, so we're at that stage, and some of the things, yeah, one of the things actually coincidentally that Karen mentioned about putting KPIs and targets within employees' job descriptions, that's one of the outcomes that's been flagged through our BCorp assessment. So we need to, yeah, we're going for a similar process where we're identifying employees and getting those KPIs and targets within their job descriptions. Another thing that was flagged up was around local purchasing policies. And that's another area we need to just strengthen on, and that's going to be part of our procurement training as well, to those individuals that procure stuff within Anthesis. And then also, I guess one of the key things out of the BCorp process for us as well is that we are going to be using the outcomes from the BCorp assessment to drive forward our CSR objectives and targets for next year. So the BCorp assessment will flag up, you know, some of these sort of key areas that we just mentioned that we need to do better on, and so we can create objectives and targets around those particular things to help us improve as a business going forward.
Yeah, because I found the BCorp assessment, I mean, it's essentially a list of things that you can do to improve your business across the whole business. It's really helpful.
It is, yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you both. Another question. Don't know if we may have covered this in in the presentation, but let's see. How did you decide which SDG goals were most important? So Stacey-Ann, maybe you could pick that one up.
Yes, so it was really important for us to adopt a holistic approach to the SDGs. We started with a blank canvas. We obviously had our objectives and targets. So we set aside some time to do a complete materiality assessment. So looking at not only the goals, but the underpinning targets for each one, and seeing how the global goals can be incorporated into our objectives and targets, and how we can collaborate and make a contribution to those. So it's making sure that you are robust and looking at everything and not jumping to conclusions in the first instance, and also engaging with our employees as well, asking them what they thought was most beneficial to us as a business, and putting that all together to identify. So at the moment, we've got the 4 core goals, but this may be subject to change as the process evolves for us as a business.
Okay, thank you. A couple of people with hands up. I think it's probably easier if you could type into the questions chat if you've got a question. Just saves me trying to unmute you, which will end in disaster.
Shall I add a little bit to that question, Chris?
Yeah, go on, Andy. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, it sounds as if we've done a very, very similar approach to what Stacey said there at Workspace, and yeah, I mean, we've used the Compass tool and the SDG Manager tool as sort of key tools to help us, you know, find out what are the key SDGs that affect the business, and then we've combined that with a materiality assessment, looked at those EMS and QMS assessments that you have to do as part of that process as well, and just trying to link it all up, and then as Stacey said, a key part of the whole process as well is getting that feedback from the key stakeholders. So your employees, your leadership team, and clients as well. We got some interesting feedback from some of our clients there, where you know, they want to know what their suppliers are doing in this area. So yeah, it's an SDG is an easy way of saying that we're doing this, and tackling each of these particular sustainability areas as well.
We just one more thing. We also looked at the SDG assessment tool on the B impact assessment. So when we were looking at B Corp, we were also looking at the SDGs because they align quite well together as well with the UNGC. So it's a really informative and useful tool, and it's a good way to start a benchmark through the B impact assessment as well.
Okay, thank you. So we've got links to those things on the final slide, and I'm sure these slides are shareable anyway, but I'll put it on the screen in just a moment. Another question, so from a company who have started looking at the SDGs and have asked, our SDG work shows that by far our largest impact is via the services we offer rather than our own operations, but this is also the most difficult area to measure impact. How do you work with clients to achieve this? I think, Andy, could you potentially take this one? I think that's probably true for Anthesis as well. You know, an office-based organisation with a bit of travel, really our largest impact is via the services we offer, and I'm sure we'd like to think it's in a positive way, but you know, as a sustainability consulting firm, but equally it's true to say that for lots of organisations, their biggest impact is through their services. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is so yeah, as you say, the operational side of things, that's the easy part, well, relatively easy. You know, monitoring your carbon footprint, your energy usage, your water usage, etc., etc. But actually, yeah, we like sales, yeah, as Chris mentioned, we're a lot of service based, so we're delivering stuff for clients, and how do you actually measure that? So that's one area we have been looking into this year, actually, is how we actually monitor our impact with clients, and the projects we're delivering with them. Some projects it's quite difficult to do that, so you know, maybe a one-off project for clients, you deliver the bit of work, there you go, deliver it yourself, and then how you know we should be following up with that client, say, did you deliver it, you know, what were the effects, how did it work, and that is happening now. We are, you know, it's more of a partnership relationship, so we are working with the client more on a long-term basis to find out how we do that. But what we're doing now is implementing ways to actually capture that information as well, and monitoring the effects of our work. And the B Corp tool, again, there's questions in there, sections in there about how you actually, what you're doing for your customers to add value. There's a whole section on that, so that has helped us sort of focus on that particular area as well, and start really drilling into how we can add value to the clients and capture that information as well.
Good. I know it's. I think the impact measurement space is quite a hot topic, and certainly we see it with investors a lot at the moment in terms of, you know, where they're having a positive impact, social or environmental, on their investments is something that is, you know, it's difficult but an interesting topic. So thanks for that question. Question for probably Stacey-Ann. Around the practical effects of some of this, or the practical implementation measures, so whether Workspace has changed energy tariffs, for example, or changed kind of the cleaning products you're buying, or, you know, water efficient taps. I think the question really is around what has Workspace been doing or looking at from a practical perspective as a result of this.
We do all of the above that were mentioned, and yes, there is going to be a practical element to the SDGs and also to the B impact assessment. So because we're looking at both of them at the same time, whatever outputs we get from the SDGs and also from the B impact, we will be able to use. So for example, we're also looking at implementing electric vehicle charging points, which of course to our affordable and clean energy SDG goal as well. So there will be practical output from what we're actually trying to achieve. We're just making sure that they align quite clearly to the goals and the outputs that we want to have going forward.
Can I just chip in just to make sure that everyone knows that we do procure 100% green electricity across the portfolio. So all of our customers can tick that off the list on their BCorp assessment.
Yes.
Cool, good, thank you.
Evidence if they need that as well for the REGO certificates.
Great, okay. Excellent. We've got a couple more questions, but I think I'm just going to skip to the final slides in case anyone wants to note down the links that we've got there. And there's a question on whether these slides can be sent out afterwards, and I'm sure that's possible. But if someone on Workspace corrects me if I'm wrong, but either way, just get in touch with these details here or through your normal Workspace contact, and we can get them to you if they're not automatically shared with participants. Okay. Final question I've got on my list right now. I suppose, what's the business case for the SDGs? So, you know, why should we be considering those things? And I think it's a relatively broad question. I suppose any of you guys could answer it, but does anyone want to tackle that one to start with?
Oh, the hardest question last, Chris. Shall I have a go? So, I mean, the SDGs, obviously, as mentioned, they've developed by United Nations, and within each of those SDGs, there's a number of target questions, and SDGs were overarching, developed for governments, and then the idea is that they filter down to businesses and to individuals to implement. There's one particular SDG that sort of sits within the sustainable consumption and production SDG, and that's around encouraging organizations, so this would be the governments, to encourage organizations to look at what they're doing in the sustainability area and improving their practices and integrating sustainability into what they do. So that's sort of a key driver for businesses, because you know, the governments, ideally, what the idea is that the government would sort of try and encourage those companies that are doing this sort of thing with policies and regulations and taxes, but also those businesses as well will be seen as a lower risk, so investments and things like that would be hopefully become a bit easier for those businesses, and then obviously winning more work. If your business is seen to be doing a lot of the sustainability stuff, then hopefully you'll be seen to win more work. As we've mentioned, a lot of clients are requesting and wanting information about what businesses are doing. So hopefully the idea of these SDGs, as I say, it does sort of filter down to the businesses, and if you do that, you will benefit as an organisation. Don't know if I answered the question or not, but
thanks, Andy. Good. Okay.
Our PIR sensors in the sustainability at its finest, people. I would also point on to the fact that when you first look at the SDG goals, it can be quite daunting because they were developed by the United Nations, so they are kind of broad and overarching and very global. But when you go down as the individual targets underpinning each of the goals, you may often find linkages to things that you're already doing as a business or ambitions that you are already setting for 5 or 10 years down the line. So for example, for us as a business, aligning to the net zero pathway for us was something that we are going to be doing anyway, but also aligns quite closely to goal 13. So it's really about taking a perspective of looking at that global impact and really making it the business case for you and looking at where you want to be going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Last one was a question which came in actually at the registration process, and it's around, it's by a company who have already mapped to the SDGs, and I think the question really is around then communicating what you've done to your suppliers and to your customers. Do we have kind of experience of having done that?
Yes, I on this one. So yeah, what we did in this sort of area was just created a supplier engagement plan that gives you, I guess, a little bit of structure in which stakeholders you want to communicate with and engage with in this space. You want to link that up with your suppliers and which SDG fits with which supplier and where the sort of key risks are. And that, I mean, that engagement plan as well, it doesn't have to be a work of art, doesn't have to be that detailed. It just, you know, list out your key suppliers maybe to start with and which SDG, as I say, is applicable to that supplier. And then yeah, send them an email. That's what we did to our key suppliers, or depending on the relationship, or we spoke to them individually and talk through our SDGs, our objectives and targets that we're trying to meet as an organization, and just ask the question, you know, how can you help us meet these objectives and targets and SDGs, and you know, what do you expect of them as well. So if there's certain key things you're looking at and you want to achieve, then ask those specific questions. You know, it could be, you know, how do you ensure there's no modern slavery in your supply chain as a business? So you're pushing the question on them and getting them to look into it. And you may find that they're all over this already. They've gone through BCorp, they've already looked at the SDGs, etc., etc. So that's possibly one way of doing it anyway, is just yeah, reaching out to your suppliers.
Okay, great. And I suppose at the other end, in terms of communicating with customers, it's how you choose to publish that information, whether it's a report or just, you know, on your website or something. You know, what's nice about the SDGs is they are very visual, and all the graphics are all there, so you can literally pull them down and map against them in a nice way. So that is it in terms of questions. So I think we'll leave it there, unless Karen, Stacey-Ann, Andy, anything else to add at this point?
That's fine. Good. No,
good.
Thank you.
Good luck with your journey, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Thanks everyone for dialing in, and thanks Stacey-Ann, Karen, Andy. The slide on the screen has got the links we talked about, but any questions, please get in touch with your Workspace or Anthesis contact. Thanks very much.
Thank you both.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.